Sai Baba of India encouraged selfless service from all who followed him, and he would always lead by his personal example. And following his example in a dynamic and patient way, Leela Champ of Singapore and her husband Deni. This story is a powerful example of how Leela's intuition or inward prompting from Sai Baba carried her into and through two significant Seva projects in Africa, a new and permanent Sai Center in Harcourt, Nigeria, and a school for orphan and vulnerable children in Lusaka, Zambia. With no natural resources and no money, just pure guts and faith. With little more, Leela accomplished much.
Ted, I never walked into any of this saying that looking at it as a project.
Leela's story is a potent lesson for anyone considering taking on Seva, selfless service. The lesson here? Don't wait to be asked. Just begin when the urge strikes.
As I said, it has always been a spontaneous reaction to a need at that particular moment. And I don't really plan or think even where the funds are coming from.
As you will see in Leela's two African projects, the will to do Seva was there, but the funding was non-existent. Leela learned to push forward anyway.
People will come on board because they're seeing what you're doing. It's the same as what's happening in Zambia, the school. We didn't wait for funds to keep flowing from everywhere so that we could build the school. We saw the need in the slums, we built the school. And now the school and the work we do and the community speaks for itself.
And choosing selfless service projects to work on should not be a difficult matter.
Anywhere where there is help needed, whether it's a family member, it's a friend, it's a total stranger, I just want to be able to give selflessly.
Leela's main point in sharing her stories with you: do not worry if you're qualified for Seva projects of any size.
You can see how inexperienced and naive I was, but as I said earlier, God doesn't choose the qualified, he qualifies the chosen. So Baba was the one who was doing everything.
And it was Baba who also gave her the idea of why she would be so successful.
My understanding of spirituality is there is no difference between God and I.
The overarching lesson taught by Sai Baba at his ashrams and everywhere. Welcome to Souljourns and to Leela Champ's story, Part 2, bringing a permanent Sai Center into existence in Harcourt, Nigeria. By the way, Part 1 of her story about building a school in Zambia is already on Souljourns. This interview was recorded on August 12th. 2023. First of all, I want to say welcome to Leela Champ, our guest for our second interview with her about her activities around the world, specifically in this case in Africa. I'll tell you about both projects that she's been involved with as soon as I welcome her to the program. Welcome, Leela.
Sarah and Ted, thank you for having me again on Souljourns.
It's a joy and a delight. Lo and behold, there's another country that reached out to you, or you reached over to it. In Africa, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Where is it located? When did you get started? And where did you find the inclination to take on such a big project?
Well, this is in Nigeria, and this was way before I started the school in Zambia, because the school was in 2006. But the Sai Center in Port Harcourt, Nigeria, was actually already existing, but we didn't really have a place to assemble. To go back a little, in 1991, when we were first posted to Port Harcourt, Nigeria, that's where my journey also with Sai Baba began. And then when we were posted in 1990 to Port Harcourt, Nigeria, I went into a supermarket and asked, are there any Sai centers here? And the manager of the supermarket, who happens to be an Indian, he directed me to somebody's home where they were actually having bhajans every Sunday. And when I first attended, the president of this Port Harcourt Sai Center said, we shall nominate you as a Seva coordinator. And I'm going like, what does Seva mean in English? Well, I just didn't think much of it. So we continued. But the call and the need for a center was so urgent because the non-Baba devotees who were watching and observing what we were doing when we used to come to this hall to pray, and when they saw us putting incense sticks and offering bananas, and they thought we were into some kind of supernatural voodoo thing. So they said, no, you cannot continue coming here. So we were actually in a dilemma, and I said, let's start looking for land. And they were going like, but who's going to pay for it? I said, let's just start looking for land. And I said, make sure that when you're buying it from the village head, that the papers are genuine and that he doesn't end up selling the plot to somebody else, which in the meantime, the plans were drawn up by the architect. And my brother happened to be going to Puttaparthi, and I said, those days it was fax. It was not even as easy as it's now. So I faxed it to him, and he brought it to Parthi, and Baba came and blessed the plans. So that, we were all very happy. So that was the first step. But we'd still not solved the other problem where, somebody else is also claiming to be the owner of the land. This was going on for 2 years. And as if that wasn't enough, the architect, who happened to be a man of God, I was told, wanted a deposit for the plans and for his work. And, I did come up with some amount. And then he disappeared. When this was happening, I said, I'm moving out of the picture for the moment until you get this settled. And then, we can proceed. And what finally happened was, that was in 1992. Until 1994, it still wasn't quite solved. And then by that time, we were transferred to Cameroon. And well, what do we do? So I said, we cannot continue with anything if this is not solved. I think it's in the Corinthians. They say, God doesn't choose the qualified, he qualifies the chosen. It's Baba who was, behind everything. Is always behind everything. And so I said, you take care of it, Baba. And I was transferred to Cameroon, and I used to keep writing to them from Cameroon. In those days, it was letters. And finally, in 1996, they managed to get the land back, and all the papers were in order. And again, coincidence or not, we were transferred back to Nigeria. I wasn't quite happy to go back, but I was saying, well, there must be a reason. So, and the reason was, when I went back in 1996, we got the land and we had to start building, right? I started putting in the funds, and I noticed that I was the only one at that time who was contributing. There were 3 of us. One person was in charge of buying the materials. The other one made sure that all the legal matters were solved. And I was sort of like overseeing everything. And we had about close to 50 members that time, and nobody else seemed to actually want to get involved. I was going like, is this right? But anyway, so we kept on building, and it came to a point where I said, I don't have any more funds. I felt that if everybody felt that way, then, we won't have centers, we won't have organizations, And I was pretty disappointed with everybody else, because I felt like nobody else was contributing or doing anything. And I said, well, if none of you are getting involved, then I'm not carrying on with the project. They kept saying, God will provide, so there's nothing to worry about. I said, yeah, God will provide if we do something about it. And I left it at that. That was in 1996. My mom was asking, what's happened to your project? And what happened to the building, the center that you were helping to set up? And I went like, no, I'm not going to carry on with it because nobody seems to be interested. And I seem to be the one who's running around and trying to put everything together. And she says, no, when you start something, you have to finish it. With that resolution, when I went back, I said, let's see where, what we can do. And believe it or not, Ted, when I said that I didn't want to carry on with it, nothing progressed. But when I went back to Nigeria and I was in the office and I said, well, I got to start looking for funds and, I've got to see how I can carry on with this. And I get a call from this Mr. Ramani from Lagos. He's no more, he's late. And he said, I heard you building a center in Port Harcourt. And how can I help? I've got lots of paint. I can help you with paint. And how else can we help? I said, paint is a good start. So that's how it got started. I took on the responsibility of carrying on with the project. Help started coming in. Some suppliers were working for Deni, like the electrician. I said, now, why don't I ask him if he could do some work? So he offered free services because he says, this is going to help. I mean, this is going to be of use to the community.
Sure.
Says, I will do the electricity for free. And somebody else sees a welder and he said, just get me the material and I will finish the windows for you. And I happened to manage to get enough funding, because I was also working at that time to do the roofing. And the building was complete. It was completed in 1999.
Okay.
And believe it or not, again, everything it's God's time. It was Baba's timing. I think 2 months later, we had a formal inauguration. And a month later, we were transferred to Vietnam. Now, the center was built just for us to assemble. And I thought it was I just wanted a big hall, a little place for a library, and that was it. And when Mr. Ramani asked me, how big do you think it is? And I said, how many people can it seat? And I said, maybe a capacity of 50, 100. And he came to Port Harcourt to see it. And he said, no, this hall can, easily accommodate 500 people. I'm going like, oh, okay. So what I'm trying to say here is you can see how inexperienced and naive I was. But as I said earlier, God doesn't choose the qualified, he qualifies the chosen. So Baba was the one who was doing everything, I was just his, go for.
Yeah, that brings me to a question. I was surprised when I first heard you talk about this in this interview right now, that you were brand new to Baba, if I understood correctly, around 1989, 1990. And then shortly thereafter, as a brand new Baba interested person, let's say, you had this wonderful, awesome, intimidating, difficult, challenging job on your hands. It was a case where anybody could say, as you said a minute ago, maybe I'm just too naive and taking on too much for me. But look at all the learning it went on, not just for the people there, how it benefited them, but how it benefited you. So tell me, how does this benefit you, all the labor you put into it?
A meaningful life. What is a meaningful life, Ted? To some, it may be having arrived where they want, seeing the children grow and being where they are, having the grandchildren. But a meaningful life for me is, as they say, to plant trees whose shade that I may never sit under. And though I was new to the Sai organization, very new, and I didn't even have an idea of what Seva meant, I just felt that we needed a place to assemble. But today, that center is having not only bhajans, but you know what are havans or homas? They celebrate all the festivities. They have homas, and they have something. They actually later did a borehole, and they've got Sai water, which because you know in some parts of Africa you have to walk very far to fetch water, or you have to buy water, you know, in gallons. So Sai water is free. So now at the center, they come in. They have access to these taps. Seva activities are still carrying on. We used to do it on a very small scale before. And I think there are about 100 devotees, it seems. But at one time, they may get only about 20 or 40. But during festivities, apparently you could get 50 or 60 people coming, which means the center has served its purpose.
Oh, it's one of the larger centers I'm aware of to have a crowd like that show up.
On Sundays is about 20, and during festivities it could be more. And when they have havans, and they do linga abhishekas on Mondays, and on Thursdays there's a Shirdi Baba abhisheka, discourses. I mean, it's so heartwarming to know that the center is being fully used. And so when we left in 1999, I never went back to Nigeria, but in 2007, I was invited for a Seva project to do a kind of a recce. And I went to the center. I didn't meet anybody because it was during the weekday. But I felt like I was like going into Puttaparthi. It was so peaceful. It was beautiful, quiet. And they had the thought of the day outside. And I actually saw a few minutes later a Nigerian dressed like a Hindu priest, and he had come to light the lamp, and that's what they do every evening and every morning. So if you're asking me about benefits, but that it's serving so many people, and they're coming there to assemble, and they have a place to assemble. That was our main problem. We didn't have a place to assemble, and we were being kicked around. So it's more than serving its purpose. And as Baba said, you first have to be, to do, to see, to tell. Meaning, in order to take up a Seva project or to lead, you have to be first. You have to be selfless. You have to have compassion. You have to set that example. To see is to see what you have done. And to tell, that's when, even without you telling, your work will tell. And people will come on automatically to help. People will come on board because they're seeing what you're doing. It's the same as what's happening in Zambia, the school. We didn't wait for funds to keep flowing from everywhere so that we could build the school. We saw the need in the slums, we built the school. And now the school and the work we do and the community speaks for itself. You know, Ted, I never walked into any of this saying that, looking at it as a project. As I said, it has always been a spontaneous reaction to a need at that particular moment. And I don't really plan or think even where the funds are coming from. It's not a need or a project that I look for. Anywhere where there is help needed, whether it's a family member, it's a friend, it's a total stranger, I just want to be able to give selflessly, unconditionally.
I want to ask you about being a Sai Baba devotee. For some people, it's enough to just nurture that energy, that interest, that love that's inside deep down in their heart. And for others, they see it as an opportunity to continue to grow in their spiritual outlooks. Where do you fit in at one end or the other of that spectrum? How's your life going spiritually right now?
So I've definitely grown spiritually because of all the avenues that has been opening up in terms of people I meet, the discourses I listen to, the books I read. And my understanding of spirituality is there is no difference between God and I. And I see that divine in every person that I meet, at least I try. And lately I've been really practicing to not ask for anything.
Put a ceiling on desires, as Baba would say.
Not really ceiling on desires, it's just for simple things like giving me good health so that I can carry on serving. And I was advised by one of the monks in Ramakrishna Mission, you don't even have to ask for that. Because if that's rightfully yours, good health, you will have it. But if you're going to have ill health, then that's also something which you are supposed to go through. So, yes, so what would I ask him? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Many people have asked him that. Where do you draw the line where you don't ask for God? You don't ask God for anything, you know?
I think you just keep moving forward. You do your duty, your dharma, and you'll recognize it when it comes to you. And it sounds like that's precisely the way you've lived your life.
Yes, yes. I just move on, accepting whatever that comes my way. It's not easy.
No, it's not easy. It's not meant to be easy, I think, as much as this is a subject that can be debated by many people different ways. I personally feel there are lessons in our lives that we continue to confront ourselves with up to and through our last breath on this earthly plane. And we can turn away from them if we choose, and many do, or we can embrace them and see where it takes us after that. And I see people like you doing that because they're never going to stop. You'll select them carefully and you'll know how to proceed based on your past experience.
Yes, and as you said, you know, there are a lot of people out there who do good, want to do good, but as Baba says, there's a difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. We all have sympathy for a lot of things that's happening around us. But how many of us have empathy? How many of us actually put ourselves in the place of somebody who's suffering? And when do we actually go out and show compassion and do something about it? So we all go through these three stages, but I think very often we stop at the sympathy stage. And where I've grown spiritually, again, to answer your question, is from very early, I put myself in the empathy position because I've always put myself in a position of a person who's hungry or who needs any kind of help. And that's what that has led or ignited the compassion element in me, I guess. So selfless service is something that we would all like to take upon. But as I said, which stage do we want to intervene in? Do we want to remain at the sympathy stage? Or do we want to move into the empathy stage and carry on with the compassion stage, which is the most important? Right?
Well, I want to interrupt you there because it would be foolish of me to let this opportunity to go by. All of us are familiar with the meaning of all these words, but you just dissected them beautifully to see how they're different from one another. I would have never thought to look at it just the way you explained it, with sympathy, empathy, and compassion. In many respects, they're synonymous, but you just showed us how they each stand on their own, all by themselves, as paths we can embrace. I thank you for that.
This is what this is what Baba has taught me, and this is what we read in Baba's books too. But how serious do we take it? As I said, at which stage do we want to remain? Right? And Baba has always emphasized on Seva.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question about Baba. It's so tempting to me to talk to other people who have never heard his name or don't care to know anything about him, to mention how much I've gained personally from him. And yet it's tough to do because many people just don't want to hear about it. they're fixated on their religion or their non-religion, and that's it. How do you handle that temptation that might well up in you?
A good example is at school. Though the teachers are teaching education in human values and practicing it, hopefully, as Baba says, a student can go wrong and that will only affect him. But if a teacher goes wrong, he's affecting his whole class, right? So I'm just hoping my teachers are practicing the values that they teach. So I don't speak about Baba to people who don't question me about who is Sai Baba, how did you get acquainted? They know I am a Sai Baba devotee, and so is my husband. They see photos of Swami when they come to our home. And for those who are curious, I explain. For those who are not, I say he's my guru. And his teachings has made me who I am today. Because the wonderful upbringing that I had with my parents, being brought up as a Hindu, was all, how would I say, the emphasis and the whatever I was taught didn't make much sense to me then. And I just felt I was being imposed with a lot of ideas. But after coming into Baba's fold, that's when it all made sense and it's meaningful. And as I said, I want to lead a meaningful life. And meaningful life means different things to different people, as I just mentioned earlier, right? So, and Baba has shown that way to me, how I can lead a meaningful life. And if the Gita claims that we are all one and we are Brahman, then I want to attain that Brahman.
Leela, I want to thank you because this is you've offered a wealth of information on how you assist in the quality of life for others in this world, as well as yourself, for yourself too. It's been a great time here on Souljourns, and I wish you nothing but continuing success in all of your projects. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ted. And as I said, I don't choose projects. It's just spontaneous reaction to whatever the need is at that time.
And thank you for underscoring that one more time. It's beautiful. Sai Ram, Sai Ram, Sai Ram.